Nobody sat me down in my 20s and told me the truth. Not really. They told me to open a Roth IRA. They told me to max out my employer match. They told me compound interest was the eighth wonder of the world, and if I just trusted the process, everything would work out. And here's the thing, some of that advice isn't wrong, but almost all of it is incomplete, because the investment that actually changes the trajectory of your life, nobody sells it. Nobody earns a commission on it. And that's exactly why you've probably never heard it framed this way. The most valuable thing you can acquire in your 20s isn't financial. It's capability. It's the collection of real, tangible, deployable skills that make you useful in any economic environment. Boom or collapse, bull market or decade-long stagnation. I've watched people lose everything in 2008. I watched people lose everything again in 2020. And the ones who landed on their feet weren't always the ones with the biggest portfolios. They were the ones who knew how to do things. Let's start here, because this one cuts deep. The conventional financial playbook, diversify, index fund, dollar cost average, was built for a stable world with predictable inflation, reliable employment, and functioning institutions. We don't live in that world anymore. Inflation isn't predictable, employment isn't stable, and the average person's purchasing power has been quietly eroded for decades while they were told to just keep contributing to their 401k. I'm not saying don't invest in markets. I'm saying don't invest only in things you have zero control over. The investment that nobody regrets making early is skill acquisition. Not one skill, a stack of them. Deliberately chosen, practically useful, economically durable skills. Here's why this matters more than almost anything else. Skills cannot be repossessed. When the market crashes, your brokerage account loses value. When you lose your job, your income disappears. But if you know how to weld, how to grow food, how to wire a circuit, how to butcher an animal, how to preserve harvests, how to negotiate, how to code, that knowledge goes nowhere. It travels with you. It works in any economy. Nobody can repo your competence. Growing food sounds almost quaint until you watch the price of eggs triple in 18 months. I started growing a portion of my own food years ago. Nothing dramatic, a few raised beds, some fruit trees, a small herb situation. And what I discovered surprised me. It wasn't just the money I saved, though that's real. A single well-maintained apple tree can produce 300 to 500 pounds of fruit annually for decades. A modest vegetable garden consistently outperforms any savings account in terms of real purchasing power protected. But the deeper thing, the thing I didn't expect, was the shift in psychology. When you produce even a fraction of your own food, your relationship with the grocery store changes. You're a customer by choice, not by desperation. That's a different feeling, and it's a feeling I wish I'd cultivated 10 years earlier than I did. Mechanical literacy is another one that doesn't get nearly enough credit. Think about what you spend money on repairs every single year. Your car, your appliances, your plumbing, your HVAC. The average American household spends thousands annually paying other people to fix things that, with 6 months of intentional learning, they could largely handle themselves. And I'm not talking about becoming a master mechanic overnight. I'm talking about the 20% of knowledge that handles 80% of common failures. Learn to do a brake job. Learn basic electrical diagnostics. Learn to replace a water heater. These aren't exotic skills. They're forgotten common knowledge that 2 generations ago every self-respecting homeowner possessed. Getting them back is an act of reclamation. Food preservation is where I see the biggest gap between what people know and what they should know. The ability to take a seasonal abundance, a garden harvest, a bulk purchase, a hunter's freezer, and convert it into shelf-stable nutrition is a skill that has historically separated resilient households from vulnerable ones. Canning, fermenting, dehydrating, root cellaring, these methods aren't survivalist cosplay. They're rational responses to a food system that is more fragile than most people realize. I've got friends who learned to ferment in their mid-20s on a lark, and now they produce their own vinegar, their own krauts, their own preserved meats. The upfront cost was almost nothing. The long-term value is incalculable. Here's one that stings a little. Most of us received zero real financial education. Not the kind that matters. We learned about compound interest in theory, but not how to read a contract. We learned to trust banks, but not how debt instruments actually work. We learned that credit scores were important, but not how to use credit as a tool rather than a leash. Real financial literacy, Understanding how money actually moves, how inflation actually erodes, how leverage actually works, how businesses actually operate, is a skill set. And acquiring it young, before you've made your most expensive financial mistakes, is worth more than I can quantify. The person who genuinely understands money at 25 makes different decisions at 30, 35, and 45, every single time. One that almost nobody talks about. Your network is a hedge. Not LinkedIn connections, actual relationships with people who have different skills than you. The person in your life who knows carpentry, the friend who knows medicine, the neighbor who knows farming, the colleague who understands law. In a functioning economy, these relationships are nice to have. In a stressed economy, they become essential. Community used to be the original safety net, before insurance, before government programs, before institutional infrastructure. Building genuine relationships with capable, trustworthy, self-sufficient people in your 20s is a social investment with a 50-year return horizon. Most people don't think about it this way until they need it. Physical health is an asset. I know that sounds obvious, but I mean it in the most literal financial sense. The body you build habits around in your 20s is the body you're managing in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The cost of neglecting physical health compounds just like financial debt. Slowly at first, then suddenly. Every chronic condition that develops from a decade of poor sleep, sedentary living, and processed food nutrition creates downstream costs, medical bills, reduced productivity, diminished capacity that no investment account can fully offset. Investing in your physical capability while you're young isn't vanity, it's risk management. And finally, the ability to produce something, anything, that other people value. This is the economic floor that nothing else can provide. Whether it's a craft, a service, a product, a piece of content, a skill you can teach. The person who can create value independently has an economic safety net that no employer can pull out from under them. The most financially secure people I know aren't necessarily the wealthiest on paper. They're the ones who know that if everything fell apart tomorrow, they could rebuild. Not because they're reckless with money, but because their capability isn't contingent on any single employer, institution, or market condition. The common thread through all of this is independence, not isolation, independence. The ability to meet more of your own needs, to be useful in more situations, to be less exposed to systems you don't control. That's the investment. That's what the 20s are actually for, if you use them intentionally. You still have time. Regardless of where you are right now, the best moment to start building real capability is before you need it. Pick one skill from this conversation. Start this week, not next month, this week, and then pick another, and then another. Stack them slowly and deliberately over years, and what you'll have built by the time the economy decides to test you is something no market crash can touch. That's the investment everyone regrets not making earlier, and the only thing standing between you and it is the decision to begin.